We leave you in the hands of USAID and the Ministry of Education. We're taking you to the Labadi Beach Hotel, where that panel of experts discussion on the Education Accountability Framework is taking place. And the panelists, Anis Hafa, Philippa Larson, Professor Opoku Antwi, and Charles Aheto Chega, all of them joining the conversation at the Labadi Beach Hotel.
Schools Ghana, Board Chairman Ashanti Gold, Anglo Gold Ashanti School, Obuasi. He's currently the chairman of the National Teaching Council, Ghana, and serves as the governor of the Millennium Excellence Foundation. He's also a senior lecturer teaching creative and critical thinking at Accra College of Medicine. He's a product of Infante Pim School, one I know is very proud of in Cape Coast, and California State University, Los Angeles. He did his graduate work at the California State Polytechnic University, Pomona. Shall we, with a round of applause, welcome him? Thank you, Anis. Our next panelist is Philippa Larson. With a round of applause, let's welcome her as well. Ms. Philippa Larson is a former president of the Ghana National Association of Teachers, NATS, and a proud teacher. She has over 30 years of experience in basic education teaching. She is the head teacher of Bojoasi DA Basic School, B Basic School, and over the years, she has served in various capacities, including the president of the Ghana Association of Teachers, NAT, from 2018 to 2022, and then also as head teacher of the Bojoasi DA Basic School from 2009 to 2020, just to mention a few. Due to her awesome communication skills and interpersonal relationship, she currently serves as a GetFund board member, Codeo advisory member, and board chairperson of USAC's microfinance company. She has also served as a chairperson of Social, Economic, and Gender Issues Committee from 2014 to 2017, board chair of the Bojoasi Community Senior High School from 2016 to 2021. Ms. Philippa Larson has attended numerous conferences. Key among them is the International Labour Conference held in June 2021, Education International's 8th World Congress in July 2019, UNESCO Executives Board session in April 2018, Pensions Administration June 2021, 61st section of United Nations Commission on the Status of Women in USA in 2017, NATS Canadian Teachers Federation Workshop on Education and Administration in August 2017, Workshop on Educational Bill 2015 at GEMPA, 64th Annual New Year School and Conference at Legon in 2013, just to mention a few, because it's indeed a long list. Under her leadership as president of NATS, she made lots of achievements with her team, several of which includes the printing of the NAT official cloth, establishment of the TF3, also known as the NAT Provident Fund, the purchase of the Sweden Medical Center, negotiation of the supply of laptops to teachers on cost-sharing basis by government, construction of 2 domes at Bancroft Village, completion of the Upper East Conference Hall, renovation of the NAT headquarters building, full documentation of the Bancroft Village land, release of the Bancroft facility to government during COVID-19, and then also aptitude test for the promotion to the ranks of principal superintendent and above in the GES. Ms. Philippa Larson is a passionate reader, writer, and loves to play the organ. Shall we appreciate her? Next, we do have Professor Enoch Opoku Antwi. Shall we welcome him with a round of applause? Professor Enoch O. Antwi is an accomplished academic leader, author, and consultant with over 22 years of experience in higher education, leadership, and management. He serves currently as the Dean of Business Administration and Communication Arts at the Economic City University College here in Ghana. Professor Antwi holds a PhD in organizational leadership from Indiana Wesleyan University and a master's in organizational leadership from Mount St. Joseph University. His academic career includes roles as an associate professor at the Viterbo University, program director at Chippewa Valley Technical College, and the Department of Dame Colleges Group. A prolific author, Professor Antwi has published 7 books on leadership, management, and education. His research interests span servant leadership, organizational behavior, and political governance. He has presented at international conferences and received multiple awards for teaching excellence. Now, beyond academia, Professor Antwi has diverse professional experience, including roles as regional coordinator for the German Technical Cooperation and a radio talk show host, and also a small business owner. He's recognized as an international ambassador of leadership and diplomacy and is active in several professional associations. Professor Antwi's expertise include leadership combined with his international experience and commitment to education positions him as a respected voice in organizational leadership and management. You're welcome, Prof. And now to our last panelist, and I'll be introducing him, and that's a very known face here in our country when it comes to education, Charles Yaw Aheto Chega. Shall we welcome him? Mr. Chega has worked with the Ghana Education Service and the Ministry of Education from 1985 to 2017, serving in different capacities and rising to the position of Deputy Director General responsible for quality and access and Acting Director General. Currently involved in the civil society organization space with the Ghana National Education Campaign Coalition, he holds a Master of Science degree from the University of Bristol in Development Administration and Planning, a Bachelor of Arts and Diploma in Education and from the University of Cape Coast. He has a postgraduate certificate in comparative education from the Royal Danish Institute for Teacher Training in Denmark. He trained in development evaluation organized by the World Bank and the Carleton University, Ottawa, in developing innovative policies in science and technology from the United Nations University in Maastricht, the Netherlands. He worked with VSO as a trainer of volunteers who were posted to different developing countries, served as a United Nations volunteer, as an international volunteer training specialist in South Africa, and in UNICEF Ghana as a social policy and planning officer. In international circles, he was a member of the Steering Committee for Education for All Fast Track Initiative, and subsequently as an alternate and board member of the Africa 3 constituency on the Global Partnership Platform for Education. Board directors as well. Now, during that period, he was a member of the Global Partnership for Education Governance, Ethics, Risk, and Finance Committee, and was also nominated for the Strategic Financing Working Group, which prepared the financing and funding framework for that secretariat. Now, before retiring from public service, he was the Executive Secretary of the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, NACA, in the Ministry of Education. His sustained interest in education see him serving as a member of the Peki College of Education and chair of the Board of Governors for the Winneba School, that's the Winneba Secondary School. With a round of applause, a huge round of applause. I'd like to welcome all of you. And then also, I'd like to reintroduce Irene Dati, who's helping us with signing this morning. Thank you so much. I'll start with you, Anis.
Yes,
I mean, you all have wonderful profile and rich experience, so we know that today is the day.
Today be today.
Today be today. Today, we're going to learn so much from you as experts as well. Right. Anis, today we're talking about educational accountability framework. To you, as an educationist, what does accountability mean?
Good. I would like to refer to my a teaching assignment in a school district where I was teaching English as second language. And this is to help American immigrants who want to move on to become citizens to learn to speak English. My KPI was simple. You have 6 months to make sure that they speak English. And you have 6 months within which to do the assessment. So accountability was quite important in terms of the structures that the school district itself set up for this to succeed. So the school that I was teaching in had a language arts lab, it had audiovisual equipment, it had a technician and all of that. Now the school's accountability was to make sure that those things work. My accountability was to develop a course outline. That to make sure that within the 6 months, I can use the access, I can access the whatever was available in the school district to make the young people, to make the immigrants speak. Now, I tend to relate that to how I was taught French in secondary school. For 3 years, I could not speak French. All you do is a subject-verb agreement, plural, singular, and I'm sure there are people here in the audience who learn French, they can't speak it. So what I'm saying, the accountability is very important. In our time, all you had to depend on was the voice of one teacher, and that was very difficult to do. However, with the right kind of equipment, it makes everybody accountable, and that is how I think we should situate accountability, in the sense that we give people responsibilities, but do they have the means with which those responsibilities will become outcomes? So that's my introduction.
Thank you so much, Anis. Shall we so? A round of applause for him. The only female amongst the men here, but we're super proud of you because you've done so much in the education space.
Thank you very much, Wendy.
What is accountability from your own point of view?
Yes, accountability is being able to be responsible for all the things you do. For instance, in our families, as parents, we are accountable to our children, just as our children are also accountable to us in all the things we do. And so in education and for education accountability, it is important for all of us to know that all of us as major stakeholders are accountable in what goes on in the school, so that at the end of the school year, we have better learning outcomes that we can all be proud of. I believe we are all aware that all countries develop around education, and so we must say that education is the pivot around which countries develop. And for us as a developing country, we cannot stop discussing issues on education, looking at the fact that we have challenges and issues, and the fact that it is important for us to be able to account for all the things that happen at the school level.
Thank you so much. I'll move to Prof. Opoku. We have two of our panelists who have explained what accountability is. Are you towing the same line, or you have a different perspective to accountability in the educational system?
Yes, I do. Accountability to me, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Accountability to me is your character in action. Mm-hmm. And that is very important. Why? Because the minister who was appointed is being paid to design policies which should be led by vision and values. That leads to vitality. Now from that, we have districts, we have regional, we have teachers who just do rote learning. And rote learning will not give us the outcome that we are looking for. So the question I always ask myself is that you have somebody who started with first grade to 6th grade, and the person cannot even spell Abba. Who was teaching that person? How was the teacher accountable in achieving the outcomes that we are looking for? You have parents who don't want to get involved in anything. They wake up, they go to the farm, and their child will have to struggle to go to the school. No motivation. So wherein lies the accountability? That means we are all responsible for accountability, and our character should show in the action so that we get the results that we are all looking for.
Thank you. Prof. Mr. Chega?
Yes.
Are you going to build on all three, or you also have a totally different perspective?
Well, I have a different perspective, but it's founded on all three, and again takes root from the brief introduction that the new COP gave. And for me, I'm going to pick aspects that actually reflect what accountability really is. And I think for me, what came out strongly and what the DCOP did was the statement, accountability is top down and bottom up. So when I put that in my thinking, accountability for me in learning is a value chain. So you have a whole system, and all of us are familiar with chains. So that if you begin to look at the weak points in the chains around your neck or wherever it is, you begin to also recognize that all of them come together to give value to how it looks on you. And so in the chain system, you have a situation where every part of the chain is actually linked. So in accountability, we are looking out for each other. Why are you working? Why are you not working? How are things going with you? So for me, that's how I see accountability and how we can put that into practice to ensure that we are helping our children to get the best out of their learning experiences in our school system.
Thank you so much. Some appreciation, a round of applause with you this morning. That established, I would first ask Anis Hafa this very first question, and building on what where Mr. Chega ended, talking about that approach, and then also value chain. Now, the very first question to you is, what are the major obstacles in aligning Ghana's existing accountability mechanisms, such as school inspections, national examinations, and education management information system, with the goal of improving learning outcomes?
Very good. It will be impossible to have any system of accountability, especially with education, without the education management information system. And we need to cut it down to size. I mean, what is it? I like to use the euphemism of a cockpit. This is a pilot who's flying the plane with about 500, 600 people. Now, he has the dashboard in the cockpit that gives him every information under the sun that he needs. You know, he needs to know the weather conditions. He needs to know the speed. He needs to know exactly what pressure outside is and what the pressure inside is. I look at education system the same way. You need to be able, at any moment, to be able to press a button or have access to information that pertains to you. Now, in terms of school inspection, you know, I've taught teachers from Accra all the way to Wa, and also from Shama district all the way to Nkwanta North and South. And then you begin to understand that school management is very, very important, especially the role that NACA has to play. But the issue is this. We have stakeholders in the system. Are they aware in real time? Do they have the data to support exactly what it is that any of our organizations for school management is? These are the things that have to now resonate in the 21st century. We cannot bury information in silos. Like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. But with the EMIS, we need to have an idea of what everybody else is doing. Now, in terms of exams, for example, if you look at BEC results that come at the, let's say, in the middle of a person's school life, it's a bit too late. What happened when they were in class 1? What happened when they were in class 2? What happened when they were in class 3? These are the formative assessments that have to be captured in an EMIS system. So what happens is this. We tend to do what we call a summative assessment or a terminal assessment at the end of the day and say that you failed, you cannot go to this school, you cannot go to that school and so on. We are not doing any service to the young people. So the information management system is very, very important. Now, the other thing we also want to say is this. As we begin to track the performances of our young people from class 1 up, now we are now in a formative position to address exactly what the deficiencies are. What are the gaps in the system that as instructional leaders we can begin to use. And this information has to be accessible to all stakeholders, to the parents, to the students themselves, that this is your performance, to the chiefs in the districts, to the regional directors, and then all of that should form the bigger picture so that it can guide policy and it can guide guidelines in terms of how we're going forward. So the information systems are very, very important. And these days, it's so much easier to do. In our time, teachers will keep what they call attendance books. And it's just for the use of the teacher. If it gets lost, we are done. If there are mistakes, now he has to use what we call Milton to make these corrections. With red ink, with red pen, and all of that. This was the colonial times. But for some reason, some of those colonial practices pervade up to today. But then the issue is this. Now this is a digital age. So we have to begin to look at those who are providing the services and move them from an analog stature into a digital stature, because this is the 21st century, and that's how we find ourselves. So the EMIS system helps to make sure that we allay all fears. We are up to date in real time in terms of the performance of every kid who is in school, and not only that, in terms of the performance attendance of every teacher in the district. Frankly, we have these tools at our disposal, and if we use them properly, then we can make sure that Ghana is moving in the right direction.
Well, thank you so much. I would skip Irene and Prof and move straight to Mr. Shega.
Yes.
Now, how can the gaps, Anita has spoken about the importance of the education management information system, but then again, how can the gaps in Ghana's current data, because, off the cameras, we're having a conversation about the importance of data for accountability. So the question is, how can the gaps in Ghana's current data systems related to measuring learning outcomes be effectively identified and addressed?
Well, for me, the basis of this rests on a number of key points in terms of this discussion. Now, we are talking about gaps. We are also talking about learning outcomes. And then we are talking about data. So these three significant things are very essential in terms of ensuring that there is a consistent tracking of what happens within the school system. Definitely there are gaps in that whole process. Now, again, I would like to link it to something that the DCOP said, which is part of the EAF that we see. He refers to 4 critical elements, and part of which you took for Anis Hafer's contribution, which has to do with data. But he talks about the 4 things, and he links them as monitoring and supervision, national examinations, school inspection, and MS. And then I add a 5th one, because that comes to my mind, community, I call it community pressure, in terms of ensuring that they exert enough pressure onto the system to ensure that the things that they want to see happen in terms of education actually happen. So my mantra in this whole discussion is that what is not taught cannot be measured. So that for me is the beginning of the whole discussion about the gaps. Now, if you want to do all of this, then there is something very significant that we can do. How can we ensure that everything we have described and printed in our curriculum can be taught, so that we can measure them as learning outcomes? I think it is important going forward for us to put all the agencies who are within this system together to be able to discuss exactly what has to be done. Because again, we are looking for how to be able to fill the gaps. And we can only fill the gaps by having a discussion that enables us to begin to look at the critical elements of the gaps that we are having in our system. And especially to agree on what kind of metrics that we want to have in the data. every time you talk about data, I'm not a data person, so when I hear data, I begin to shake a little bit because I'm asking myself, what are the things that I have to look for? But they are the important things that we need to show when we want to point to progress. So all the people who are within these 4 critical elements will have to come back to the drawing table and say, look, everything is not fine. Let's now agree and say, we want to measure this, we want to measure that, we want to measure all of this, so that we can classify all of them as proof of what children have learned. And for me, one critical dimension of it is to have a second look at the curriculum. Teachers have complained, and all of us know that teachers are complaining about the curriculum. It is important for us to go back to it to find out whether we are helping teachers to know what children have to learn within the curriculum. Is it there? Can we find it? Do they know how to use those things? So it helps us to put together the things that we need to be able to get the right data sets that we want to share and indicate how children are learning in schools.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, Prof. Nchi, Charles Shega says he's not comfortable with data, but I know you love data. You love to work with data. And in building on from there, what do you think are the key principles and priorities that should shape the Ministry of Education's approach to accountability for learning in Ghana?
Thank you. Having schooled in a very remote area, 7 kilometers away from Domahinkro, Abuabu number 4, that is where I had my primary education. So when we're talking about data, 2 things we have to do. We need to probe data and then probe our mindset. I will explain the 2. The first one is probing data. There are many things that we've been told, and education is the only place where we critique ideas. So I will start from the ministry. If you are a minister, if you are a regional director, if you are CISO, and you go to a meeting and you are talking and nobody is saying anything, there's no input and everybody is listening to you, then you are in trouble.
Yeah.
Because there's no input, there's no accountability. So we need to watch that. The second part is that it is not every time that data tells the truth. People will tell you that math don't lie, right? But data sometimes is the idea that it is given to you. So let me give a practical example. You have somebody who is 50 years, another person is 40 years, another person is 30 years. Add 50 to 40 plus 30, you get 120. You divide it by 3, you get what, 40. That is the average age of the 3 people. But ask yourself, the one who was 40, would that person ever be? The one who was 50, would that person ever be 40? Please answer me. The answer is no, right? One was 30, one was 40, one was 50. You add the 3 ages is what? 120. You divide it by 3 is 40. So averages don't exist. It's just the idea. I'm just trying to be professorial sometimes. Then you look at the children. I need to talk about the scaffolding events, formative and summative assessment, which is very key. Teaching is almost outmoded everywhere that I go. In fact, if I've taught in US for 20 years, and what is happening is that if I teach in Ohio or Chicago or New York, it's different from me teaching at Wisconsin or North and South Dakota or Iowa, because it's a farming community. So we're talking about GLOCAL, using global knowledge to solve local problems. And here we don't have teachers who are even writing books that can fix local problems. So somebody sits in Accra here and write a book that somebody in Nandom or another vital area, rural area, will read a book and will not understand. We were doing geography and we were learning about snow. I went to US before I saw physical snow. But we're talking about snows and snows, something that you cannot relate to. But we teach from the known to the unknown. So let's make those local areas, what is happening there, to teach these kids so that they can understand. It's also beautiful to see parents everywhere, when the semester is about to start, going to Walmart and buying school supplies. Why? Parents feel that they are part of the school process, so they are buying school supplies for their kids. Here, even pencil, they want you to go to your teacher, right? Notebook, they want you to go to your teacher. But the teacher is not even being paid enough to supply these things. So when we talk about resources, we need those resources. But we should also take good care of the resources, because the donors are also getting the money from some taxpayers. And we need to put good use of it. That is why I started that it's a character in action. The money that you are getting is not free. Somebody is giving it to you so that you improve your system. How do we become accountable right from the ministry throughout the regions and the district to the local level, where even the assembly member and the unit committees will be part of the process, so that we hold the teacher who is always drinking petrol accountable, so that the teacher will come to the classroom and teach. We hold the parents accountable so that they make sure that the student, the child, the learner also comes to the classroom and learn. And then when we give them homework, we make sure that they also do it. That is the only way we can transform them from point A to point B, because the outcomes are more important than the processes. Thank you.
Good. Interesting insights there. Outcomes are more important than processes. I would also want to indicate that we are live on all Joy News platforms, on television, as well as online. Outcomes more important than processes. Now, Philippa Larson, outcomes more important than processes. You've been a teacher for years, and I know that outcomes matter to you as a teacher. In what ways can decentralized management of teacher deployments be improved to ensure an even distribution of teachers' improved accountability of learning outcomes?
Thank you. Teacher deployment is the process where teachers are assigned or allocated to schools, classes or grades, various subjects or communities. It used to be typically the responsibility of the district directorates of education and the school authorities, who are the head teachers. Now, at the school level, authorities are still deploying teachers to the various classes and grades and to the various subjects. Unfortunately, that responsibility of the district seems to have been taken away from the district. It seems now teacher deployment is centralized, and teachers are deployed right from the headquarters, especially the newly trained teachers. And district directors of education are advised not to touch them in terms of reposting. Now, if they are to deploy teachers from the headquarters level, it is important to do so with recourse to data that is submitted. Because at the beginning of every term, at the end of every term, school authorities and schools present data on teacher demand and supply, enrollment figures, learning outcomes, and the needs of the school. And so if the headquarters has taken over and centralized the deployment of teachers, it is important they do it with recourse to the data that has been submitted. What happens at the end of the day? You have some schools overly staffed, whilst others are neglected. And so you realize that the district director, who is also accountable to the regional director at the end of the day, who has been asked not to touch these teachers in terms of reposting, will have to look on unconcerned. At the end of the day, school improvement support officers, who are the CISOs, who should have also been mandated to at least look at the gaps and the surpluses and do the needful, cannot even do that. And so at the end of the day, when you are talking about learning outcomes, you see that some schools will be doing very well and other schools will be having a below average performance. It is also important that when it comes to deployment of teachers, we engage the local communities. A lot of the communities would want to have specific type or sex of teachers who will serve as role models and also for easy accessibility of accommodation. For instance, you have a community where the Odikro has put up a facility to maybe accommodate male teachers. Unfortunately, because the community was not engaged, the headquarters or whichever level of the education ladder has deployed only female teachers to the place. At the end of the day, they will have a problem with accommodation, so they will have to live outside such communities and commute to school every day, which also creates a problem because in some of these rural areas, you realize that sometimes vehicles move only on market days. And so if the market days are 2 or 3 in a week, it will mean that those teachers will have to go to school 2 or 3 times in a week, and which is not helping us. At the end of the day, it is important we allow the CISOs and the district directorates of education to look at the gaps in the various schools, in the various subjects, and do the needful. At the end of the BECE, data is submitted in terms of results. We also submit analysis based on male, female, on subject and all that. And so at the end of the day, when you are deploying teachers, it is important you look at the performances of the various schools so that if one subject is not doing very well, you conduct investigations to find out as to whether the teacher who is teaching that subject is qualified or not, as to whether that teacher has the passion to do it or not, and do the needful. Sometimes it's just a matter of filling vacancies. And so you realize that in terms of numerical strength, the school will be overstaffed. But when it comes to context, the school will be lacking teachers because the school cannot even put in a request for those teachers who are particularly interested or qualified to teach those particular subjects. And so it is important that if we want to enhance decentralized deployment of teachers for effective accountability, communities must be engaged. Again, it is also important to allow the various communities to identify indigenous talents within their areas. Was it Saturday or so I was listening to the news, a school that was mentioned had only 2 teachers, 1 teacher and 1 headmaster. And so when the headmaster is called to the office to attend a meeting, and because it's an island school, it takes almost 2 to 3 days before he comes back. And so that 1 teacher has to handle early childhood to primary 6, 8 classes. But if the communities have been allowed to identify indigenous talents and supply them into the mainstream education system, they would have accepted postings to those areas and they would have remained there to contribute their quota towards national development. And I was very happy to hear that day that those 2 teachers, the 1 headmaster and the 1 teacher, were schooled in that community. And that is why they have agreed to remain, to also train people to come out, to become like how they are and what they want them to be. And so it is important to deploy teachers based on data, based on the information that they have. It is also important to have transparent and clear policy directives on teacher deployment. As I mentioned earlier, teacher deployment used to be the responsibility of district directors. They will be deployed from the headquarters to the regional levels, then to the district, then to the schools. Now that it is being done at the headquarters, we don't even know what is going to happen next year. Last year, a similar thing happened. The directors of education were able to amend a few things to repost them to schools that needed teachers. But this time they have been advised not to touch those teachers. And so what is going to happen is that at the end of the day, the performance that we expect will not be as is expected. It is also important to provide incentives to teachers who accept postings to rural areas or underserved areas. Look at these 2 teachers I mentioned in a school, 1 headmaster, 1 teacher, teaching 8 classrooms. What sort of incentives are given to them? Because others were posted or deployed to the area. Unfortunately, they reported in an attempt to go and come back. They never came back. And so it is important we give incentives to teachers who accept postings to those areas so that they can also give of their best. Look, teachers or unions in education at the pre-tertiary level have always negotiated for these incentives and captured in our collective agreement. Unfortunately, those incentives have never been implemented. And I want to use this platform to urge the unions on to continue to fight for those incentives to be implemented. And at least those things would motivate the teacher to give off his or her best, irrespective of where he or she is, so that everybody will be accountable in what goes on at the school level.
Well, thank you so much, Irene. I hear these themes run through what you mentioned: community engagement, data, clarity. And it's also important to reiterate that the overview of the use of accountability information is to help improve learning outcomes, which is at the community level, school level, district and regional levels, and then also at the national level. And they're all very, very important. A round of applause for my panelists. Now, we're moving shortly to part 2 of our conversation. And I'll start with you, Anis. You also have a rich background internationally when it comes to learning outcomes, teaching and learning as well. Now, how can international learning indicators, on the back of what Philippa just shared with us, how can international learning indicators and best practices inform the development of a comprehensive data dashboard? Because data from every point, everyone has mentioned data here, and we all admit that data is very, very important. So, data dashboard for tracking learning outcomes in Ghana. Would you like to repeat my question?
No, I'm fine with it.
Great.
Thank you very much. I'll do the best I can.
Okay.
But let's give Wendy a hand, okay? Let's give Wendy a hand. She's fantastic.
Thank you.
I've known Wendy when she was very young. Like, she's a big woman, so I have to run after her. I don't see it anymore. Okay, now, what they say about data is simply this. In God we trust. For everybody else, bring your data. Because that is how you're going to assess whatever it is that you want to present. But I will share an international experience with you. I was very young teaching in the Los Angeles Unified School District. And there was a faculty of about 100 teachers. I was the only African. And the job was very important to me. Because we bought a house, my wife was pregnant, so I needed that job. So what did I do? This was in the 80s. And luckily enough, that was the time that Steve Jobs and Bill Gates had started the desktop computer. This is the 80s. So how many of you were born in the 80s? Oh, my pimp.